Welcome, everybody. Thanks for making it out on a chilly, chilly night. It's not as cold as Ottawa, but it's cold. Tonight, we're going to do an exercise in figuring out the core values of what we stand for and all that sort of stuff. But first, let's go to Jason, if he has a couple of words he just wants to say.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mike Cameron, who is acting as the facilitator for those who don't know in this room and who are watching on Joey's live stream for the Participatory Budgeting Ward 2 year-long event that we've already embarked on. This is our second official full meeting, and we are still, as you can see by the overhead, in the planning committee stages. So far it's been very exciting, and the group continues to grow, and I see we have a bit of a gallery tonight as well, which is impressive because it is about engagement and empowerment, and it's a totally open and transparent process. And it's much appreciated. And certainly you're going to hear a lot of, probably tonight, thoughts, opinions, a bit of a brainstorming feel in some segments of tonight's agenda, I'm sure, but also you'll get a sense of a rather organized pursuit thus far, even though we are in the early stages of this year-long 2013 process. And that is primarily due to two key players. One, already mentioned, Mike, our facilitator, but also Norman Kearney, who's done a lot of work to date and over the course of many, many months leading up to getting this process started. A process that is fully endorsed by Council and ultimately sees $1 million awarded in the PBW2 experiment at the end of the year, likely around December. So I just want to thank everybody for once again showing up, being part of this, again, early stages, planning committee stage, and encourage all of those who are watching on the live stream to sit back, listen, enjoy, and feel free whenever and as often as you like to offer your input, whether it's tonight or anywhere in the confines of the window that is PBW2. So thanks again to Mike and to Norman, and let's get moving.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't introduce myself, but I forget. I know who I am, so I just keep forgetting to tell anybody else. Let's go around the horn here. I just want each of you to say who you are and where you're from, so people across the room know what's going on. Always press your, what is it, Jay, green button? The red button. Push the button to talk, and then push it when you're done talking. Thank you.
Are we starting here? My name's Peggy Ann Mansfield, and I'm with the North End Neighbors Association. And I'm here, I'm their rep, and I'm here to see what's happening, what I can add to it, and what we can do.
I'm Dave Stevens, President of the North End Neighbors. I'm just passing the role, breaking in Peggy here.
I'm Mike Borelli. I'm the co-president of the Beasley Neighborhood Association.
I'm Joanna Millions. I'm a member of the Stinson Community Association.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brian Goodman from Stinson Community Association.
I'm Peter Grafe. I live in Durand, but I'm a nominee, I believe, of Jason Farr.
It's just that you know you need to speak.
Okay, well now I know the answer. I can speak closely into the microphone. A nominee of Jason Farr.
Hi, my name's Rachel Edge, and I am a nominee from Norman. Am I?
Yes, a lot of the nominees from the councillor. Just a lot of the nominees from the councillor and I have been negotiated and jointly appointed. So if you can just actually tell us what your affiliations are, that will suffice.
My affiliation is with Engine New Generation Youth Center, which was formerly known as the Globe, CISO's Youth Center, downtown, just right here.
I'm Nicholas Kevlahan. I'm representing the Durand Neighborhood Association.
My name is Matt Jelly. I'm representing the Central Neighborhood Association.
Hello, my name is Nancy Mars. I'm the VP of the Corktown Association.
Thank you. We have to do a declaration of conflict of interest. If anybody around the table here thinks they have a conflict of interest, speak now. Excellent. You've all seen the agenda. We should vote to adopt the agenda. Somebody want to make a motion? Motion by Peter, seconded by Mike. All in favor of the agenda?
Quickly, just are there any concerns, any changes to be made before we adopt it? Okay, thank you.
All right, at this point, we're going to do a little bit of a review of participatory budgeting. Shouldn't take too long, but for those of you who are new to the roundtable here, it'll help get your creative juices flowing. So I'm going to turn it over to Norm, and he will take you through this process.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It's great to see you here tonight. Very excited to be doing this with you. This orientation is just to get everybody onto the same page. I've met with most of you individually. A couple of you are new faces, and very glad to see you here. I just want to make sure that you have the benefit of the information that the other members of the committee have. So this will be a quick overview. The terms of reference of this committee are going to be available online either tonight or early tomorrow morning at a website, pbhammond.ca. But some things that you should draw your attention to is the committee's purpose is to consider the structure and rules for participatory budgeting in Ward 2 and to establish budget assemblies prior to its scheduled dissolution before or on July 31st, 2013. So we hope to be done entirely by that time. I'd like to be done long in advance of that. I'm sure you would as well. But those are our main responsibilities and goals. The membership, as Mike has indicated and as we've probably got the feel for with the introduction, there's 14 members in total. We currently have 2 vacancies, but 6 of the seats come from the neighborhood associations and 6 of the seats come from the councillor and I, and then the councillor and I are co-chairs. So just once again, the terms are available online tonight or tomorrow. So what is participatory budgeting? This process started in Porto Alegre, Brazil in 1989. It spread to thousands of cities throughout Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And it's now beginning to make inroads in North America. So simply, participatory budget transfers decision-making authority over a share of a municipal budget to ordinary residents. So it's a transfer of authority, a sharing, if you will. Through budget assemblies, residents propose ideas for how to spend the budget, and they elect delegates to build some consensus. And a participatory budget is determined usually by a public vote of residents, often including any resident 16 years of age or older. 2 things to draw your attention to here, the use of the word resident rather than citizen, and of course the age. In most examples of participatory budgeting that I'm familiar with, resident is the sufficient condition. So you don't actually have to be a citizen. That's something that we can discuss as we go forward. 16 years of age allows more youth to get involved in the process, and often we do see a very high turnout from young people, if proper engagement is done. Brian Wampler is one of my favorite scholars to consult on this because he's a very critical scholar. He's also been studying participatory budgeting for over 30 years, or related institutions. It's only 23 years old. Recently, he published he was an editor in a special edition of the Journal of Public Deliberation. I'll put this online as well. It's free to the public, so I encourage you to go there. There's about 12 articles, all worth reading, and a very diverse survey of the literature. He says that the main feature of participatory budgeting is to adopt and adapt. So there's no set of best practices being used anywhere in the world, but there are 4 common principles, he argues, and he says those are voice, vote, social justice, and oversight. So I'll just leave those in your mind for now, and we can come back and talk about those more in the discussion period. But for him at least, those are the 4 main principles. So in every model, there seems to be a couple of key features, budget assemblies being one of them. These are public spaces for deliberation. They're often 1 or 2 types, regional. So in Ward 2, for example, it might be along the neighborhood association boundaries, and thematic, so focusing on topics. Sometimes there's a youth thematic committee, sometimes there's a health or infrastructure, and so on. Proposals, obviously, if we're going to be spending money, we need proposals. Delegates are there to kind of shepherd the process along so that residents don't have all the weight on their back, and they also participate in the negotiations. And then a vote, obviously, is how it concludes. Brief historical overview. As you can see, participatory budgeting is making inroads here in North America. The very first North American city to do it was Guelph. Toronto Community Housing Corporation briefly followed, along with Montreal, although I believe their process is no longer in effect. They're doing a slightly different consultation process now. New York City and Vallejo, California this past year. I was in New York City when they were doing their very first participatory budget last year. It was actually exhilarating. They had 4 districts, each with $1 million, and in total they had 9,000 residents come out and participate. They had 6,000 residents vote, and 250 residents participate in voluntary positions, delegates, facilitators, assistants, and so forth. And this year it's actually expanded to 10 districts. They have over $14 million now, and we'll be joining them soon. So I prepared a couple of questions. I'd like to open this up for discussion now. Joey, we need to use the mics, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like this to be an open-ended discussion. I'm going to pose a couple of questions, and I'd really like to have your thoughts on this. Feel free to comment back and forth to one another, but if you can, go through me so that we can keep it organized. So the first question I have for you is, are you satisfied with the way that democracy is organized and practiced in Canada today? And this can come from your own experiences. This can be a theoretical thing. So anybody in the room want to take a stab at that first? Brian? Sure. Everyone in this room is happy with the way democracy is going in Canada. Why?
I guess for various reasons. I guess on federal and provincial levels, I guess you see. I think our first past the post system is sort of out of date and could use, and I think what excites me about the idea of participatory budgeting is sort of something closer to direct democracy. So I guess in that sense, but also on the local level, what I see a lot of, sometimes there will be a consultation kind of thing, and it's maybe not as well promoted as it could be, and you only get a certain amount of people out for that kind of thing, and then that consultation can end up forming how decisions are made, and I guess just maybe more of a fulsome consultation, and maybe using different methods, and whether that's functioning local website, city website, that kind of thing. So
if I'm hearing you correctly, one of your frustrations is that there's limited scope for participation in the current system.
Right, and I find too that sometimes those consultations don't always have much effect on the end decision as well. Other factors sort of play a role in that as well. So.
Right. Often what we find is people are cynical when this process is initially introduced because precisely as you said, they're tired of being consulted and being ignored. It takes a lot of energy to come out to meetings and to prepare your notes. I'm sure most of the people in this room are familiar with the challenges of activism. Nicholas, I think I saw your hand as well.
So first I have a question about the introduction. So you said this participatory budget models coming to Hamilton 2013, but I thought Ward 1 went through a similar exercise. Is this going to be different from what Ward 1 did, or are we following in their footsteps?
It's a very good question. Brian McCaddy this past year introduced a budget consultation process. He's calling it participatory budgeting. By some definitions, yes, it is participatory budgeting. Brian Wampler, who I cited, would say it's pseudo-participatory budgeting. It has some of the most important elements, but it's lacking a couple. I think the councillor is continuing to develop this process, and I'm pretty sure it will be a participatory budget for sure. As for what this group is going to do, that's entirely up to this committee. Hopefully what we're going to do today is determine some of the values that are most important to us, and those will guide the development of the process. We also aren't chained to definitions. I shared with you one definition from Brian Wampler today. It's a definition that's pretty common, but there are much broader and narrower definitions. I can send you a lit review that might be helpful for one, and that's going to go up on the website as well, kind of a summary of the definitions, the challenges, the successes and failures. But I don't want the committee to feel that there is a predetermined concept of what our participatory budget is going to be. Basically, the introduction was simply to get our thoughts moving on the matter. Any other feedback for this question? So, under the current arrangement, the way democracy is currently arranged, how do you feel about your ability to solve some of the problems that concern you, be they here in the municipal level, the provincial level, the federal level? Do you feel that it's easy for you? What are some of the challenges you would cite? Dave. Mike, please, yeah.
Through social media and that, you hear a lot of people complaining about certain things and that, but you don't actually see them doing anything about it, right? I'd like to see like more people get off their butts, so to speak, right? And actually stop complaining and do something about it.
Any thoughts on that?
I think one of the problems is first one up there, democracy is organized in practice. I think there are a lot of, I'll use the word, although I don't think a lot of marginalized people don't feel that they have a part in it. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't come out to vote. We have to some way allow people to feel part of the process, and that's one of the very reasons I'm here. Is that maybe we're going to engage more people, and when people feel like the community is theirs and their voice can be heard, then they feel like part of, and I believe they'll do more things. What Dave just said is true, but I think it's because we haven't engaged people in a way where they feel like part of it. And if we don't find a way to do that, that's a whole segment of the population probably that has more to say and a lot to say about how their lives go that we need to hear, but we don't engage them.
Great, thank you, Peggy Ann. Nicholas, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, so I'd like to follow up with something Matt said about consultation, and I think it's a bit of a shame that the local level is where it should be easiest to influence democracy or get involved in democracy. And there's a lot of consultation opportunities going on. And I think I've told this story before, but I moved here from France where I'd been for 4 years, and there was no consultation whatsoever. Things got done and they just seemed to happen. And I came here and there were all these opportunities for consultation. I thought, wow, I can get involved and have some influence, or at least help form the final decision. And after a few years, I realized that it was a veneer of participatory democracy, but really the consultation was more about fulfilling the requirement to consult, and also a kind of therapy. It's giving people a chance to vent and feel that they've got things off their chest, and then the people making the decisions can go off and make the decisions they really wanted to all along. And I think what would get people more involved would be the feeling that, as we hope we'll do here, that we can actually make a decision. And in our country, making a decision means spending money. So you have a decision that involves spending money.
A phrase that's often used in the PB circles is budgets are policy without rhetoric. Kind of put your money where your mouth is, I guess, in a more academic setting. Matt.
Just referencing something that Dave was saying about just civic engagement, there are a lot of people that have sort of concerns and complaints, that kind of thing, and I think one of the problems is there's not a whole lot on the city's part or government's part to help citizens understand what they can do with those concerns, right? So that's why so much, I think, ends up on Twitter or Facebook, and hey, I'm as guilty as anyone on that, right? But I think that's maybe something we lack. I think in Hamilton is there's not like a part of our city's website where you can, that's called how does City Hall work kind of thing, because I think for some of us that are involved in community organizations, that kind of thing, we start to learn how it works. But I think for the average citizen who, if they've got 15 minutes a day to pay attention to what's going on in the world, never mind on their own front doorstep kind of thing, they, you look at any report that comes from staff, for a lot of folks, it's jargon heavy. It's, so it's, I think all citizens can do more to be engaged, but I think also governments can also play a role in making that engagement easier, right? Because I think if someone's got everything else going on in their lives, they don't have enough time to engage the way that some of us might, they're turned off really quickly, right? And especially if it's, again, going back to that issue of consultations, if they've been through an experience where they've been consulted and then sort of it ends up, completely different to what they had, and not everybody just gets their own say on something, it's obviously a consensus, but, I think we have to be aware of what, discourages that engagement and productive engagement, and that's, I think, what ends up in some of the kind of sniping that goes on, right?
Any other questions? Yeah, Joanna.
One issue that we've found in the past that has come up with regards to getting people engaged is the habit we have of, I hate to say the phrase, talking things to death. So, you talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but nothing actually gets accomplished. So after a while, people are just like, well, you know what, I'm not going to go to another meeting, so we can just sit and talk for another hour. Nothing's going to happen. So people are, in onset, you see a large engagement, you see a large group of people will start to come out because they think, hey, this is great, this could really work, this could go somewhere. But again, the same old talk it to death starts to happen, and people start to teeter off because they're like, I'm not going to another meeting where you're going to talk for 3/4 of an hour over one little thing. You're wasting my time, your time, everybody else's time. Nothing's going to get done. So I think one thing we need to show is not only are we going to talk about it, but we're actually going to accomplish something. Because if all we're going to do is talk, then I'm just going to shut off my mic and leave, because talking is not going to accomplish anything. I want to actually see things done, and I want to be able to tell people, no, this is what we're going to get done, and here, look, see, it's actually happening. Not, oh yeah, it'll get done. Just don't worry about it, it'll get done. Just hold on, just watch.
I'm hearing a lot in the room on the sense of we have to have meaningful action in addition to all of this planning and deliberation. Joanna raises a really important point, and it actually segues right into my next question, is what does it mean to deliberate? I personally think there might be a difference between talking, and deliberating. And does all deliberation need to involve active participation? Anyone have a thought on what constitutes deliberation? Is it the same thing as discussion? Is it the same thing as debate?
This is going to be a long conversation, I think.
Was that a pun? Play on words. Dave?
Well, deliberation could be as much as a couple neighbors getting together, like, oh, I hate the way the bus is, let's get a bench there, right? Deliberation could just be a few people on the street corner talking, like, that's where grassroots groups start growing out. Like, we need to get the word out there somehow to actually show that we mean business, that we can actually do something.
Any other comments on deliberation? Like, what is the spirit that's important? Are there certain commitments that people need to make when they come to a table together to deliberate rather than, say, debate?
I think, in deliberation, there has to be some sort of concerted effort to work towards either decision or some sort of course of action. Discussion, debate, that's sort of kicking around the old peanut, that's great, but deliberation, I view, as something that, ends with a decision or some form of action that both parties or all parties can agree to participate in.
So So I drew some of these questions out of your survey responses, which we'll get to in just a moment. I think I'm going to skip ahead from some of these questions, but one that I think is really important because it comes up quite often in these discussions is, what is the proper relationship between deliberation, participation, and efficiency? And what do you count as efficiency? When people talk about these participatory models, often the first thing they think is, oh my goodness, this is going to take forever. We're going to be in meeting after meeting every single week. Think about the amount of time and money that we're investing in this. And that, of course, brings up issues of accessibility and social capital. But does anyone have any thoughts? Like, how far can we go with deliberation before we become inefficient? Is there such a thing as inefficient deliberation? Joanna, and then Nick?
Absolutely, I agree that, I mean, if that's the way it ends up being week after week after week of meeting, which point where we're deliberating the same points over and over again, that nothing is actually going to get accomplished, so it is completely inefficient. And at what point do we just say, okay, you know what, we're not talking about this anymore? Obviously, we're just talking ourselves in circles, we're not going to get anything accomplished. So do we end the discussion and say, okay, drop this line of conversation, it's not going anywhere, move on to the next item?
Nick, and then Nancy.
So I think there's two factors you have to look at. One is how long it takes to reach a decision, because if you're talking about where to go on summer holiday and it takes you, 6 months to decide and it's already September, then even if you find a great place to go, it's not really very helpful. Whereas if you make a decision very quickly, but it's not carefully considered and it turns out to be a bad decision, then that's not efficient either. So I think what you want is a process that's sufficiently quick and careful, but also gives you the right outcome or good outcome.
Thank you, Nick. Nancy.
Something to you. Thanksgiving weekends are beautiful in Ontario. Anyways, I think you have to deliberate too. In fact, you get some consensus and direction. But I want to go back to the part where you're talking about resident versus citizen and 16 rather than the age of majority. So would that be later in the discussion we get back to those points?
We can discuss that later. I think it'll probably come up in the value section where they're talking about who has a place at the table and why. But if you want to make a quick comment now, I welcome that.
Because I think it has to be a citizen rather than a resident, because you can have foreigners start doing political agitating. And then 16, a bit young without proper guidance is my feelings, but you go ahead and say what you want.
I think rather than respond, I'll ask, are there any thoughts on that comment?
I disagree.
Councillor Farr?
Well, the wordage, first and foremost, probably it was inappropriate. Foreigners, maybe not politically correct, and believe me, I know politically correct now, but no skin there, no worries. I would suggest that it's debatable, but when we're talking about, and you've kind of hit on what the theme is now anyway, that deliberation is, everyone has an opportunity for consideration. In this process, that's what it is. In terms of talk, we know up front the process. I mean, that's something that's not for deliberation, at least in this planning stage. We know it's a year, and we know we already have approval on $1 million. So we know at the end of the year, that sum, give or take, probably a little more if we have to, it's okay, just a little more, is already approved. So this isn't about getting halfway and getting tired. It's about just continuing to expand the deliberative process where the consultation includes everybody. It's completely inclusive. If you're in Ward 2 and you're a resident, if you're a special interest group, if you're a large group, a small group, if you're 6 seniors in the north end or 100 seniors in the south end, and you all want to get together on a project idea, we allow it with participatory budgeting. I feel that that's something that was established long ago, and if you're new to the process, you should know that, because I think that's the most significant part of this process. And if you think you have a better idea, get 200 people, and get them involved, as long as they fit the criteria, they're 16 or over, and they're from Ward 2. So it's a consultation, it's an inclusive, not consultation, but a collaborative, and it's inclusive. Everybody's involved in this conversation, and it's one we just want to continue to grow and grow and grow. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I don't mind, like, all the residents participating and understanding what's going on. I think that's fair. But I do have a big legal problem with foreigners deciding what we do with our budgets. I think.
Well, I'd just like to interject at that point and say that this is a multicultural country that is currently enriched by its diversity, especially here in Hamilton in Ward 2, where we have the intermingling and the sharing of cultures and wisdom, worldviews, and aspirations. And I think that only could make this process better, frankly, because democracy is not about serving a single interest, a single age group, a single classification. But I think I hear what you're saying about you want to ensure that this is a process that puts Hamilton's needs and interests first. But I think by excluding people who may not have citizenship, we may be neglecting people who nevertheless make up an important part of the social fabric of Hamilton and in Ward 2. But I'd like to leave that for now. I don't mean to take the last word. Only I say this because we're actually going to move into a new section of the meeting in a moment where people will have an opportunity in breakout sessions to discuss this rather thoroughly. Rachel, you have a comment?
I just wanted to comment on the youth age as well, in addition to your point. Thank you, Councillor. As a young person who works with young people, I'm amazed, especially at newcomer youth, that actually the pressures and the responsibilities that they have at age 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, having 2 jobs and going to school, taking care of family. So there are probably some young people that might be more innocent, but especially in Ward 2, I know that there are a lot of young people that go through experiences and have the experiences of a 30-year-old, or also 25-year-olds who may be acting like they're 16, right? So.
Hope you're not talking about me. I'm 25.
Thank you.
Norm, can I just say something?
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I just want to address something that Joanna was talking about. Yes, people can go on and on and on talking about things endlessly, but I think it's worth noting that we are called the Planning Committee. So we are going to plan this. We may deliberate a little as we're planning it, but we're all here for the same purpose. So we are going to plan this, and we're going to carry it out. So that's our intention, and as the councillor says, this is all approved. So now it's up to us to make it happen, and that's why we're here.
I just want to jump in here and clarify. I don't know if Joanna was saying that there's going to be too much talking around this table. I think maybe the worry was that residents at large might become frustrated, lose interest, and not come back, and then jeopardize the success of this project if it ends up being nothing but talking, nothing but reports. I think, Joanna, do you have anything quickly, or is that correct? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I saw another hand. Dave, and then we're going to move on.
I do like the engagement with the younger crowd. Working with the Jamesville, we were doing surveys to find out what residents want. You'd ask an adult, what do you want to beautify your neighborhood? Oh, I want more bylaw enforcement officers, to get rid of these guys doing the illegal dumping. But you ask a kid, it's like, he'll ask for a few more garbage cans. They have a totally different look on ideas. So I think the younger age engagement is crucial. They will show us a different point of view.
I think that was a very insightful comment about accessing different demographics in the city for their diverse views. So thank you everyone for filling out the surveys. I know that was tricky on some questions, but the responses were fascinating, actually, and I've summarized them. I haven't attributed them to anyone because I don't want anyone to feel that they're being judged or interrogated for their comments, so you can step in and out of commenting on these as you'd like. What I'll do is I'll just quickly summarize and give my comments and then open it up to the floor, and then we'll move on to the next question. So what attracted you to PB Ward 2? There was a lot of interesting responses. Some people said they were familiar with citizen empowerment. Interestingly, this was not our professor of political science, so we have a lot of other scholars in the room. Direct experience with community engagement projects, opportunity to nurture social capital, and I'll come back and explain that in a second, and personal connection to the ward, for example, volunteering work or upbringing. Social capital is an idea that was introduced by an American scholar, Robert Putnam. He basically wanted to reveal the impact that a person's place in life and their relationship with other people in society has on their life chances, their opportunities, their choices, really. He said there's two types of social capital: bridging and bonding. Bonding capital is when people who are rather alike develop close relationships with people who are just like them, and they strategize around shared interests. Bridging is when those bonded groups, representing different interests, different histories, different values, reach across and form partnerships of mutual interest as well. Putnam thought that the decline of democracy in the United States could be explained by a failure to bridge, by society isolating into homogenous groups. And he thought that the solution was to create social networks, such as, say, participatory budgeting, where people are brought together and, despite their differences, put in situations where they have to cooperate and develop an understanding of one another's situations in life. So any comments on that, first of all? I mean, it was kind of just an introductory question, so I'll move on. What does participatory mean to you? Some comments included equal opportunity to be heard, going beyond consultation. I think we heard that from Nick earlier, and Matt and a few others in the discussion today. Active, informed citizens share power to determine priorities and allocate resources. Relevance of material resources and being non-hierarchical. So these were all things people thought were important with respect to being participatory. Material resources obviously being participation in democracy is expensive, so we can't ignore the financial question. There needs to be money in place to support this. Often what we see is a lot of sweat equity, a lot of people putting in their own time and energy out of a sense of community belonging, ownership, and a willingness, but certainly material resources are important. You'll need to jump in if you want to comment, because I kind of want to move through this quickly so we can get into our breakout groups. Suppose that you're sitting in a meeting of PB Ward 2. Who's there? This was particularly interesting. It was very diverse, a lot of different answers, a lot of different assumptions. Neighbors, elected officials, community leaders, people who want to be part of how the community spends money and time, people who are educated, uneducated, abled, disabled, etc., informed representatives, special interest groups, the media, homogenous groups of socioeconomic privilege, and various functional groups such as facilitators, secretaries, and neighborhood representatives. Anyone have any comments on the groups that people identified as probably being present next year when participatory budgeting is happening? Sorry, later this year. Anyone left out? Anyone on the list that's surprising? Anyone you want there? Anyone you not want there? Matt, and then Dave?
The homogenous group of socioeconomic privileges?
I'm glad someone said that.
Don't quite understand that one, yeah.
Yeah, from what I understood from the person's comment, there was a fear that the people who would come out would only be, as I say, kind of a bonded group, the same privileges, the same life experience, the same goals.
Right.
Dave? Oh, same comment? Okay. Anything else?
I'm glad to see there's just a wide scope here. There's just about everybody in Ward 2 in this community covered with the feedback that you received, which this slide represents. And, you know, we heard earlier from Peggy Ann in the North End that there isn't enough engagement from the disenfranchised, and in some ways that's true. I'm fortunate enough to have seen enough engagement so far. I still think there should be more, but from every demographic there needs to be more clearly, and we're just looking at the percentage of people who actually vote that really gets something like this rolling. It's not just those disenfranchised that don't go to the polls. There's people living over on Ravenscliff that probably gave up on us a long time ago, too. So, you know, we've had tenant engagement. We have a really good tenant engagement happening now with City Housing. We have a safety and security task force, and we have probably some people here now that are either watching on the live stream or maybe are here, and they're going to take part, and I'm glad they're going to take part, but that's just one area. I mean, there's I think we've covered just around this horseshoe a pretty good demographic, and that hopefully continues to grow when we start branching out in committees and subcommittees and everything else, and it's a good representation of the diversity that is this ward. So I'm glad that there's a lot of variety up there, and I was with Matt. I just didn't want to turn on my mic and say it. Homogenous group of socioeconomic privilege is, that's where you, yes. It's interesting. Anybody want to, who gave that one? Doctor? If someone wants to explain that further, that's fine, but either way, I like that bullet.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to feel on the spot. We didn't ask you in advance whether you were cool with releasing your comments, so next time we'll have a little option on the survey. Well, I'll ask you later if you want to do another survey, so we can talk about that in a minute. This one was interesting, a really wide range. What proportion do you expect will participate in participatory budgeting Ward 2? We have a real optimist amongst us, 100%. 40,000 people are going to come out. I don't want to be organizing that participatory budget. That's going to be pandemonium. I don't want to curtail participation. But we saw everything from 1% to 100%, most concentrated around 1 to 4%. A very interesting comment was targets distract from more important matters, and I would agree with that. My interest in asking this question was just to get a feel of what people's expectations were. If everybody responded with 100%, I'd feel like we are setting maybe the bar a little too high for our first year, but we seem to have like a fairly common agreement of what our goal should be this year is around 1 to 5%, something in that range. Part of the question was, how can we accomplish this? Answers were social networking, door knocking, leaflets, and there was a worry that marginalized groups have been conditioned by their experience, and we've heard this a couple of times today, to distrust formal institutions and to feel like these aren't spaces that are there for them, and that they'd be wasting their time, or that they just simply wouldn't be welcome. So that's something we'll need to be attentive to. How do you hope residents will feel after completing their first year? Empowered, informed, and pleased. People wanted to see tangible effects at the street level, not more reports. Again, we've heard that today too. Greater social cohesion and faith in government. There was a concern that people feel that it was worth their time and effort, that they want it to happen again, and that they feel inspired by each other's commitments and efforts. Pride and a belief that change is possible. Any thoughts? Again, a really diverse sample of thought, which is very encouraging to me. It means we have a lot of different contributions coming from our group here. Question 6, who could benefit from PB Ward 2? Who could lose out? What implications could this have for PB Ward 2? Some people thought it was simply a win-win. Others were a little bit more suspicious, worries that historically underrepresented groups could lose out, for example, women, youth, Indigenous peoples, racial minorities, people with special needs, LGBTQ, and low income. A worry that power groups and well-organized factions could co-opt the process, and the fear that some neighborhood associations could out-participate others. So there's a lot in here. Anything anyone would like to respond to? Councillor Farr?
Very quickly, if you don't win this year, try again next year. I mean, hopefully this isn't annualized till the end of time. So, you know, we may, at the end of this experiment, we'll call it that for this year, some of us may feel cheated. And that's just going to be part of the process, and ultimately it's part of democracy, right? I mean, there's a competition here, for lack of a better way to put it, and there might be some group that gets organized, even unbeknownst to us, the planners on the planning committee in the end. But it's democracy, and if you get the most votes and your project wins, then you got the most votes and your project wins. But there's always next time, and the time after that, and the time after that. And hopefully everyone, including the people around this table, learn from that and move on. But it's a really grassroots example of actually the process as it should exist anyway, right? So hopefully that made sense.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Councillor. Nicholas.
So one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is the question of legitimacy of the group and legitimacy of the decision, and I think that's what some of these comments are a bit skeptical of. One thing we have to be careful about is that we're not elected, unlike our councillor, and also the word participatory is deliberate. It doesn't mean we do an opinion poll of Ward 2 and that the top choice wins. It implies that, as Jason said, that there's some degree of informed participation, that people actually have to come in and get involved. And I think if that's what we want to do, we need to be clear about that, because that's different from just canvassing Ward 2 and trying to get a vote on the favorite project.
Thank you, Nicholas. Any other comments before we move to the next question? Brian?
I just wanted to comment on Councillor Farr, that we are at the planning stage right now, and I don't believe that we do have a model set right at the moment. So it could very well be a win-win. It doesn't mean that there's going to be somebody just the best vote wins. So that's all I wanted to say.
So you're saying that when we move forward and design this process, we need to be sensitive to these issues so that it is a win-win. Is that what you're saying? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
A little bit of words in my mouth, but that would be a really nice thing to happen if every part of the ward did have some type of, did get a piece of the pie, you know, rather than it just going to the highest vote. That's what we'll get into when we're discussing how the process goes.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay, next question. Can you think of some challenges to implementing PB in Ward 2? How would you address these challenges? There was an awareness of tension between individual and collective proposals. So a worry that kind of cross-ward projects might lose out to popular projects that benefit a smaller group. PB might not be relevant to Canada because it comes from Latin America. Getting the word out, attracting a diverse mix of people, quick wins, preventing domination by power groups, simple and quick process, timely communication with the city, scheduling meetings to fit everyone's schedules, honoraria for volunteers who take on big commitments, and daycare, interpretation services, etc. Anything here leap out to anyone that they'd like to comment on? These are some of the challenges and solutions to those problems.
I don't want to comment on it, but I'm really intrigued by that second bullet point. Why someone might think that it's not relevant because it comes from someplace else. The model is a model, and we'll make it relevant, but just seems odd.
And, Nancy, yes, go ahead.
Okay, he didn't put the whole information, like Canada was between the 60s and the 70s, the first richest without slave trade country. Now, after the Liberals got in, things have been changing drastically. So I said that before that line. Why would we be taking imported advice when we had the first richest without slave trade model? That was before that, sorry.
Actually, those facts are incorrect, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Brazilian-Canadian economies, the Brazilian social condition. First of all, Brazil is a cultural treasure trove. People like Paulo Freire, for example, the great educator on critical pedagogy, he's Brazilian. In 1992, which is the closest date I could find with comparable data between the Canadian and the Brazilian economies to when participatory budgeting started, the gross, net, and adjusted economic purchasing power of Brazil was several times that of Canada. And in fact, the divide between the productivity of Brazil and Canada has remained pretty steady. Brazilian economy has grown by 315% over the past 17 years. Its poverty has fallen by 36%, ours has fallen by 11%. And inequality in Canada has actually increased substantially if you use the Gini coefficient, which is a fairly standard measure of inequality, whereas in Brazil it's held relatively steady. I mention these facts only because Obviously, Brazil is capable of performing in several important respects, and without even getting into the issue of whether ideas from other places are somehow inferior to ideas here, you would think we would give Brazil the benefit of the doubt. It's certainly performing at our standard. Now, whether that standard is an appropriate one or not is a question that I don't know if we have time for. Anything further on the Brazil question? Quickly,
Canada,
Nancy.
we give Canadians the benefit of the doubt.
Well, we're sitting in a room of Canadians who seem to be interested in participatory budgeting. Finally, what role do you see yourself playing over the next year? Fairly consistent answers here: getting the word out, educating, clarifying assumptions around the design of PB Ward 2, considering the impacts of marginalized groups. And, sorry, anything for that?
I just wanted to say something about question 7 there. I thought one of the best comments there was just near the end. One of the challenges that we face at Beasley, considering the diversity in our area, is making sure that everyone can participate meaningfully, and having interpretation services so that the different cultures that make up Ward 2 can participate meaningfully, I think is very, very important. And I think it will have benefits not just to the PB process. I think there's going to be significant spillover benefits to other community groups that work in Ward 2 who will benefit from just having those new connections, those bridging connections that you talk about.
Thank you, Mike. And finally, and we'll wrap this up and then we'll get into our breakout groups, what do you want PB Ward 2 to achieve? Short-term incremental changes at the street level. So again, that emphasis on actually being able to see, touch, feel the fruits of your labor. That can have a very powerful transformative effect on people. Putting residents in charge of determining trades-off and priorities, new ways of listening to each other, sustainable infrastructure projects in a quick, open process, confidence for a larger scale process applied to the city's general infrastructure fund, so kind of thinking in the long term of maybe seeing PB expanded. Improving the wards and the city's reputations and tightening social relations, and a platform for marginalized and silenced voices. And I saw Dave's hand.
Right there with new ways of listening to each other. We're consulting in here. Have we talked to anybody in the peanut gallery? Do they have anything to add or a question?
Thank you, Dave. Certainly on my list of things to do is to turn it over to our guests here up in the auditorium. They don't have microphones, though, so I was thinking they might enjoy more the breakout sessions when they can actually come down and join us, which I was about to invite them to do. However, Dave raises a good point, and we are a participatory body planning a participatory process. If anybody wants to come down and comment on anything that they've heard in the survey so far, you're more than welcome to. You can come use my mic. If not, I hope you'll join us in a couple of minutes in the breakout sessions, which are going to be a lot more lively, and this room is going to get much louder. Okay, so thank you for your patience. I know this has been a pretty grueling overview. The hard part's over. I think the fun part begins now. So what we're going to do is a World Cafe. Is anyone here familiar with that process? A couple of you. Okay, so I'm going to step away from the mic just to explain it so I can actually use my hands. What you're going to do, a couple of pieces of cardstock. You can take as many as you want. They come in fashionable different colors. Pick whichever color you prefer. There's a number of markers up here. And what I'd like you to do is to write down some principles or some values that you think should underlie our process. Now, I think the surveys will have helped us get there a little bit. You might have had some ideas that didn't come up. You can write a word like inclusivity, or you can write a sentence like, I want PB to be a place where people of all race, class, gender, ability, occupation, etc. can realize their goals. And you have a lot of flexibility in what you can write. I'm going to write. Once you've written it, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to do that, so take your time. Take a piece of tape, come over here to these easels, and just tape it on here. And feel free to use the whole thing. They're not going to stay here all night. And what we'll do after that is we'll let everybody take a quick water/coffee break. I don't know if we have coffee. Whoever forgot the coffee will be punished.
So we'll just take a quick break, and then what Mike and I, maybe the councillor or anyone else who wants to, you're all welcome to help with this if you want. We're going to come over here and kind of group them. And the reason for that is we're going to break out into small group sessions. There's 3 flip charts with easels out here. So we'll group them, and you can pick which one you're most interested in. If there's too many of you at one, we'll reorganize you a little bit. And then we'll spend about 10 minutes at each of those having a discussion. And what I'd like you to do is obviously get familiar with each of the values that were put up there. But also to talk about how are these going to relate to the actual day-to-day experience of participatory budgeting. What's at stake with this value? Let's bring it from the abstract down into the actual practical. And I think this will be very helpful for all of us. What we'll do is we'll rotate, so you'll actually get to have a discussion about all of them. And if one person at each group when we start can decide to stay there for the entire time, that would be great, because then you can act as the kind of memory of that area. And we'd like you to take some notes. This is voluntary. If your group doesn't have someone to stay, it's not the end of the world, and maybe I can stay or Mike can stay at one. And then what we'll do is we'll come back in here, we'll have a brief summary, whoever kind of was elected or nominated to summarize it, we'll do that. And then we'll go through a brief discussion if we want to. This will be up to you entirely. And we'll actually vote on which values we're going to keep on the list. Now this is a working document. I want you to think of this as something that is alive through every meeting that we have. Today we're going to do the bulk of the work on this. But with each meeting going forward, when we talk about the rules, the procedure, and so forth, this will be open. And we can pick it up again and say we need to strike something or we need to add something because we forgot it. So today is not like the end of the valuing process. Today is the beginning of it. And hopefully we can get the work going on that. Is this something I said?
It's just something none of us said anyways, don't worry about it.
So why don't you take a minute, stretch your legs, come up and grab some of these. We've got a couple of markers. You'll have to share. Try to write reasonably large enough so that as people are, walking by, they can get a feel. I'll break these up a little bit.
So we're writing values?
Yeah, principles, values, statements, expressions, anything that comes to mind that you think is important for us establishing kind of the vision of this process. My goal is that what we come up with today will be able to go, oh, he left the room. We'll be able to go back to this document and use it as a reference point to help justify our decisions. So I'll just start splitting these up over here.
And while we're doing that, we just want to welcome Evelyn Myrie from the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, one of the committee members. And again, gallery, you are encouraged to participate. So if you want to come down and write on a piece of paper, please do. Clerk.
Okay, so who found that to be an easy process? Who found that to be extremely difficult and challenging? Apparently it was neither easy nor hard. All right.
Awkward.
It was awkward. Why was it awkward?
Basically trying to put one word into a sentence, interpret a meaning.
Okay, so there was some linguistic challenges interpreting what people meant when they wrote something down. Other challenges?
One of the things I've seen is just how big of a job it's going to be, and looking at all the different things that we're going to look at to make it. I think it's going to be life-altering, actually, for me, trying to do that. Yeah, it's a big thing, and I'm really happy to be part of it. And yeah, I need to say this because I have been someone who's gone on about governments at every level, and I'm very proud of Hamilton that we're doing.
Thank you, Peggy Ann. What are some of the things you think we can learn from this experience? Did everybody agree about everything? Pardon? No? Not necessarily. Was anyone surprised by anything they saw? A little bit? How so?
Sorry. I was surprised by how detailed and specific some people got with their suggestions for basically what's supposed to be what. Sorry, I'm not sure. My brain doesn't feel like working right now. Basically, a lot of the suggestions that came up were very, very specific as to things that they wanted. And my understanding of the role of this committee was more generalized and a bit more of defining the procedures that we will be following when it gets to participatory budgeting. Then when it reaches the community level, that's when specific wants and needs will be addressed. That's maybe my understanding's incorrect, but I didn't think that we were at that stage where we needed to focus on exactly specific items that communities wanted. We were looking more general, big picture.
Mike?
And maybe just going further than that, it was one of the things that surprised our group was that discussion about wants and needs. And I suppose, and maybe I'm speaking for my group too much, but we expected that would be worked out by people and not necessarily by this planning committee or by, some sort of structure within the PB process, but rather the decisions about whether we need or want something will be ultimately decided by the voters, the people, the residents at the end of the day.
Interesting. So I asked everybody in their group to choose one person to kind of speak a little bit about what they, some of the conclusions they came to, some of the general thoughts they had. If we could just maybe have a quick, maybe 30-second statement from each person, maybe starting over on this side. If you're one of those people, switch on your mic. I don't know who they were. Mike?
And that was pretty much what...
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. From another group, was that Norm, I think, or Peter?
I think, a lot of these, it's kind of almost also the flip of what was said, in that there was a lot of principles people wanted to realize, but they were quite abstract in how you'd actually do them through a process. So like I'm sitting in front of a page here where it's a lot about open communication, and how can you ensure that these meetings are, respectful and people listen to one another and kind of, deliberate. And so, our role in terms of developing processes and rules to achieve that is kind of complex. How do you set up a system so that you get that outcome? And similarly, some other ones about participation and, being open to all, right? So it's important to think about how we design this thing so that we achieve those values, but there's quite a distance from saying them and then how you actually make them happen by setting up rules that will hopefully foster that kind of interaction.
Thanks, Peter. I saw a hand over here. Was that a response? No? Okay. Norm? Could you just introduce yourself quickly, too?
Oh, introduce myself.
Please.
Excellent, yes. My name is Norman Pace. I'm actually a student in political science, the master's program at McMaster University. I found this project to be absolutely fascinating, and I appreciate that people actually had mentioned what's going on in Ward 1, because in fact, it's my opinion that the process here is much more inclusive, and this appears to be quite bottom-up rather than top-down. So it's quite fascinating to see, and very encouraging to see that there's this opportunity for people here to share and express their values. My understanding is that other wards and councillors who have considered such things haven't gone to the extent that we have gone here today. So I'd like to thank Councillor Farr and Norman for going the extra mile to make sure that we have this level of inclusivity, which is really important. Bridging that with our final topic, it was quite vast. There were labels like multiculturalism and things like that, and we had some difficulty in trying how to condense these ideas. But what we determined was essentially the final chart was discussing power. How is it that we're going to ensure a voice to every individual who wants to be involved in this? But most simplistically, and my friend Brian here actually had a very good way of trying to cut through the divisions of race and gender and class and simply say, I'm a resident, therefore I count. It was also mentioned that I am a person and wish to be identified as such. It seems to really be the process of why we're here today. So It's a very interesting and very encouraging solution. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm, for your comments. Is there another group representative on this side of the room? We've only heard 2, 3. One more is hiding. Who is hiding? Yeah, so that group will have to stay after class. If you don't have the sheet, is this, I don't know which one was yours.
This was the last one we were at.
Oh, okay. Is it this one? Green? Thanks for volunteering.
I thought you were doing it. Okay. So this one was, we talked about transparency, a simple, adaptable process for arriving at practical and effective solutions and projects above board and public. Information sharing in order to be efficient, what we concentrated on. How do we bring transparency to our neighborhood residents and invite them to witness or view what is going on already? And we also talked about how would we evaluate the process. So constant reflection and evaluation of the committee itself and making sure that we're going in where we might want to be or residents might want to be. Anything you wanted to add? Members? No?
So I know this was a frustrating and difficult exercise, but I think it was pretty helpful, and I think we'll find that it's
even more helpful as we move through actually developing these rules. What we've done tonight really is voice a lot of the assumptions, a lot of the concerns, a lot of the expectations that each of us have, and we've had an opportunity to get familiar with all of them. Obviously, there's a lot more depth to reach while we do this. I think tonight we don't have enough to be conclusive about what these principles are. So Mike and I were talking while you were working out front, and what we're thinking is appropriate is a couple of members who are interested, and that could be members of the committee or members of the public who are here as guests. If you want to come see me after the meeting tonight, what I think we'll do is we'll get together for some coffee or something like that, have a more focused discussion, and try to draft up some statements that we can report back to this committee with and present and have a vote on. I think we have a wealth of data between these sheets, or between these cards and these sheets, and your survey responses to really get a head start on this, informed by your values and your concerns. So does that sound all right to everyone? Is there anyone who would like to change that process or recommend another way forward? No? So everyone's cool with that? Okay, so we don't have a date yet for the next meeting. It'll be approximately 3 to 4 weeks from now. We'll do our best to lock that date down by next week with you, so we won't have the scheduling nightmare we had this past time, which was mostly coming back from the Christmas break or the holidays. Sorry? Oh, it was out there, sorry. Any final thoughts from anyone on the committee? Don't worry, we're not going to do this type of rotate exercise every time. Next time we'll actually have tangible things, I think, to work on. Mike and I have also talked about the possibility of having working groups, so smaller subgroups of the committee who have a specific interest and would like to spend more time developing the proposals. So I'll be emailing you about that, and we can take your recommendations. Maybe you want a group on accessibility or one on inter-ward collaboration. I don't know, whatever your interests are, we can certainly allocate some time, and I can make myself available to support you with that too. So thank you to all the committee members who came out tonight. You did a lot of hard work. Thank you to the members of the public who came out and participated. It was really encouraging to have a gallery. Thank you for Councillor Farr for making this a reality, and we will see you in about a month. Yes, Dave.
You have the council's emails. Are you willing to take the residents that showed up, their emails, to put them on a mailing list to keep them informed?
What I think might be easiest, I mean, you can come up to me and write it down, or you can email me. And my email address is info@pbhamont, like Hamilton, Ontario.ca, info@pbhamont.ca. And once again, I'll send an email to the committee members with the link, and all this data will go up online, and you can share that with your communities too. All right, yes, Nancy?
What was that website?
Yes, www.pbhamont.ca. I think Joey Coleman is responsible for that Twitter hashtag.
And with that, Norman, thank you very much, and I know we're going to move to adjourn officially in just a minute with Mike, our facilitator, but thanks to Joey. I mean, we heard and saw the word transparency, and certainly having this live stream is helpful, and I think we'll have an opportunity to rewind and watch ourselves. Some of us will be watching the back of our heads, but Brian, you got a nice looking back of your head, so later tonight, you'll be able to hear your thoughts and actually follow some of the conversations from those who were viewing this out there in hashtag Hamontland too, a little later as well. So thanks to those people who were engaging and part of the conversation out there in cyberspace. But really impressive effort tonight. If anybody was bored by the consultant-like scenario in play for a limited time, I thought the discussion overrode everything. Or maybe trepidatious about continuing, there will be free coffee at the next meeting. So
it's a good note to end on.
Yes.
Can I have someone move to adjourn this meeting? All right. Thank you very much, folks.